Why will Tee Higgins and Mike Williams rebound big time at wide receiver for your fantasy teams in week 2? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we look at our wide receiver and tight end rankings only on Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie, Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
So, Michelle, we are getting into our wide receivers and tight end rankings today, so it'll be a lot of fun. And hopefully we're looking for a lot of guys to rebound because it was disappointing, especially at tight end, but a lot of wide receivers underwhelmed as well. So we'll get to those rankings to help you know who's going to be bouncing back, who are guys you're going to fade this week. Garrett Wilson, not feeling it that great here. So we'll see. But I have to tell you before we dive into that, it's Crossover Thursday on the network. There, as we break down all the games for you. The Crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, Michelle, we got to dive right into our rankings here. I think we're pretty much close to the same on the elite guys that you're going to play week in and week out, but two guys stood out, I think, even more than we expected here in week 1, and that's Chris Olave and Calvin Ridley. I think these guys were just awesome. They played fantastic, and they were locked in with their quarterbacks, new quarterbacks in both cases.
Yeah, we both have them in the top 10 here. And actually, our top 6 wide receivers are all the same names in different orders. But Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs. We each have those guys in our top 6 in different orders, but you're playing them every single week, no matter the matchup. I have Chris Olave at 7. You have him at 9. We really like him against the Panthers this week. Panthers top corner, J.C. Horn, is going to be out for this game. He might be out for a while. And we saw right away he had that connection with Derek Carr. It took a little bit in the game. I mean, Olave wasn't doing anything there for a while, but he ended up coming through with 10 targets, 8 receptions, 112 yards in week 1. So I love this matchup for him. And then Calvin Ridley, I mean, just right off the bat, he hasn't played football in so long, and he was just right away Trevor Lawrence's main dude. And you can't ask for a more, like, this should be a high scoring matchup against the Chiefs. Trevor Lawrence is going to have to throw the ball a lot to keep up with Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, it's hard to keep either one of these guys out of your top 10. They're must plays moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I love these guys. And again, this is why talent, just route running, opportunity, being clear number ones, all those things really lined up for both of these guys. So I think it'll continue. There'll be pretty high floor guys as well, but there'll be weeks where Olave goes off. He didn't have a touchdown, so we'll see that potentially happen. And I think these guys are going to be just too involved as number ones to take out of the top 10. It's going to be really hard to do that going forward. Now, Michelle, one guy that I am high on again this week is Devonta Smith. And I just like this guy. He just gets it done here this week. I have him pretty high here. So when you look at it, though, it's just the consistency. He's always out there. He's the guy that caught the touchdown. Look, this Vikings secondary has tried to improve here for Thursday night, but I still think they're a little bit vulnerable on the back end. And Devonta Smith is just so technically sound. Going to run the best routes here. They'll try to contain A.J. Brown. So I think another good game for him. And I think also Brandon Aiyuk I have in my top 10 because, look, this is why I was a little bit worried about Deebo Samuel. The Brock Purdy, Brandon Aiyuk connection is real. And Rams secondary, look, they played over their heads last week. They still struggled with DK Metcalf. They're going to scheme these receivers wide open. So I love these guys this week. And maybe we've been so enamored by the way A.J. Brown and Deebo Samuel are like built and like they're this great athletes, but these other receivers are really special, I think, as well.
Yeah, they are good players, right? And I have them ranked again. I have Devonta Smith at 13, so I moved him up a bit from last week. You have him at 7. And then Brandon Aiyuk, I have at wide receiver 17. You're higher on him at 10. I'm saying they're both good wide receiver 2 plays. the thing with either of these guys is they can disappear in any given week because of their offense that they're in. So it's going to be hard for me to ever really trust them as a consistent top 10 wide receiver. I mean, obviously, if they keep doing every week what they've been doing in week one, I will start to have them up there as like dominant plays. But in any given week, it can be a Kittle, Debo, CMC, week, or it can be, CMC every week for Brandon Ayuk to disappear. And then with Devonta Smith, if AJ Brown goes off or, Dallas Goedert actually gets a reception, he could also not do as well. So it's just I think they're going to be a little bit more inconsistent, but yeah, you're still plugging him into your wide receiver 2 spot and you're feeling good about it.
Yeah, they're definitely like wide receiver 2s who can easily spike up to wide receiver 1s in any given week. So I like that floor ceiling combination. Now, Tee Higgins, I think he was on the floor. I don't know if there's a sub basement, but maybe that's where he was last week. 8 targets there and 0 catches against the Browns. But the Browns secondary is good. On the outside, the Ravens secondary is not good. And we saw Nico Collins and Robert Woods. These guys had some success here. So Tee Higgins also has had a great history when healthy against the Ravens, has gone off here. And Jamar Chase as well. He's had monster games. So I love this whole Bengals offense to rebound. We've talked about it, but Tee Higgins in particular, and I think another guy that we've pumped up a lot was going to come back. I think Mike Williams. I love him in that matchup against the Titans this week. Maybe Austin Eckler sits, so they need to pass more with Justin Herbert. So a lot of things lining up for these guys. Forgettable performances in week 1, but these are the big rebound candidates in week 2.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Tee Higgins' bad week 1. It was just terrible for Joe Burrow in general, and I think he comes out and has a better game. The Ravens aren't a scary secondary, and they're dealing with injuries back there. They just let Nico Collins have 80 receiving yards in that game. It's a home game. I expect Burrow to be better. The Ravens have a pretty solid run defense as well, so I think they're going to focus more on the pass. Tee Higgins is a good play. Mike Williams is no shocker, right? We clearly both really like Mike Williams, but he's one of both of our guys' favorite plays this week. It's just the matchup is so juicy. The Titans have been the best run defense and the worst pass defense since the start of last year. They've allowed the most points to the wide receiver position, and no defense has allowed more deep passing yards and touchdowns than the Titans since the start of 2022. While Mike Williams leads the NFL in air yards per target since 2019. Love this matchup for him this week. If he can't do it this week, right? And he had a down week, maybe I start to get lower and lower on Mike Williams throughout the year, but this should be a monster week for him.
Yeah, and the rankings say it for both of us. So Michelle has Mike Williams at 12. I'm at 14, so pretty close. We're right there, even on Tee Higgins at 15 this week. So these are guys that we expect to really have nice weeks and come back. Now, Garrett Wilson, this one is a tough situation. I had trouble ranking him. Michelle ended up at 18 with him. I took him at 20. So we're right in the same range. We still love the talent of this player. He saved his night with a touchdown on a horribly thrown ball by Zach Wilson. That should have been an interception, but he's Garrett Wilson. He's very talented. It's a tough matchup this week, getting this Cowboys secondary. It's brutal, and Zach Wilson. But keep in mind, this guy was wide receiver 19 last year with a quarterback disaster. So I think he could be a little bit better this year just in terms of his own play, right? And there's not a lot else in this passing game at this rate. So I think you're just going to hope that he gets enough targets. He goes up and makes a play on a bad ball by Zach Wilson, whether it's a big player touchdown, and that's what you get. But I'm not going to write him off. This player individually is so talented. We talk about Chris Olave. His talent is just on that level. So, and I think Zach Wilson, at least it's a quarterback he's familiar with.
Yeah, I'm not writing him off. I just don't feel great about him, right? Like, you're going to play him. You just don't feel great. You don't feel like he's going to put up a huge game. This matchup just stinks, right? If it was an easier matchup, I'd say, okay, maybe you can get it done with Zach Wilson. But I mean, mostly all of Garrett Wilson's good games last year came with either Joe Flacco or Mike White. And with Zach Wilson is when he would disappear. And it just didn't look like Zach Wilson was any better. I mean, I know he had to come in like when he wasn't expected to play, but the Cowboys just shut down Daniel Jones and the Giants so hard. Do we really think the Jets and Zach Wilson are going to do any better? I mean, maybe they'll score more than 0 points. That's definitely a possibility. I can't picture Zach Wilson being able to handle that pressure that the Cowboys defense is going to put on him. So he's just going to have to just fling it out to Garrett Wilson, and hopefully Garrett Wilson can get it done.
Yeah, and maybe we'll see a quarterback change at some point, and maybe it's Tim Boyle.
To who? Tim Boyle, though? Like they don't have anyone.
Well, at least he knows the offense, which is good. And you said, look, it's not like Joe Flacco and Mike White we were counting on. At least someone who knows the offense that's competent to put the ball in the hands of a good receiver. And maybe Zach Wilson will surprise us. I doubt it, especially in this matchup. It's just, I think I feel more of him as a wide receiver 3, but I think you're obligated to play him as a wide receiver 2, even though you drafted him as a wide receiver 1. So let's just hope he doesn't go plummeting here and have real close to, at least somewhat close to the value where you drafted him, where you're not going to get that anymore. So we'll get into some of the other wide receivers here, Michelle, and some notable names that we might be disagreeing on.
Yeah, we'll get into some guys we have ranked as a lower wide receiver 2 this week or wide receiver 3. Some really fun names to discuss that we think are playable or not playable. We might have some debates there. Before we get into that segment, let's talk about a really great company, Jase Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication, delivery, and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com and use promo code LOCKEDON to get $20 extra off. All right, Vinny, getting into some of these later wide receivers that we still feel good throwing into our wide receiver 2 spot or maybe a wide receiver 3 flex spot. There's a couple guys we disagree on here, right? It's George Pickens and Zay Flowers. So I'm higher on George Pickens this week. I'm at wide receiver 25. You have him at wide receiver 37. And then you're much higher on Zay Flowers. You have him at wide receiver 20. I have him at wide receiver 33. Tell me why you feel a bit more confident about Zay Flowers this week over a guy like George Pickens.
Well, Zay Flowers, I loved his usage in the first game. And you look at the Bengals, they struggled most with Elijah Moore. They moved him around. Look, it wasn't very high volume and production. He actually had 7 targets. There wasn't a lot of production that came with it. But I think Zay Flowers is a similar type receiver, just better. Already, I think, as a younger first-round pick. So I like Flowers and his role, and I think this can be a really high-scoring game. They're going to have to get him involved here. Mark Andrews' return should actually help him here that we expect. So it's going to open things up for Flowers in other parts of the field. So I just expect a very high-scoring game. I want to be attached to this. The Bengals have a pretty good secondary all around, but I think if you're going to say they're vulnerable somewhere, it'd be inside a little bit more than the outside. So I think Flowers, they'll scheme him open well, and I like the potential there in a high-scoring affair, where I don't see the Browns-Steelers game being high-scoring, and I also don't like the fact Deontay Johnson's not in the game. That means Denzel Ward could be there on George Pickens. Last week he faced Charvarius Ward, so a couple Wards here early for Pickens, and again, another corner that can cause a lot of problems. Ward played really well last week. I also like Greg Newsome, so if he's on a different guy, I think it's going to be tough here for George Pickens. So I also worried about the front end, right, with Myles Garrett. Can they get the ball downfield to George Pickens? So I'm just looking at the games. I want to attach myself a lot more to one AFC North matchup over the other.
Yeah, with Zay Flowers, I actually worry about Mark Andrews coming back, right? Zay Flowers caught 9 balls last week for 78 yards. So that's very little production on 9 receptions. And if that goes down just even a little bit, you expect Mark Andrews to be the top target once he's back. Then what are you getting? 6 receptions for like 50 yards? I don't know. I mean, it's not going to be a terrible play. I'm a little bit worried that, in week 1 without Mark Andrews, it just made him look a little bit better right off the bat. And then for George Pickens, I expect him to be the top target. It is not a great matchup. I'll give you that. And that's why he's wide receiver 25. It's not like I'm saying he's a must play or anything, but I do think he's a viable option this week because the Browns overall are tough against wide receivers, but they have allowed 13.1 yards per reception to wide receivers since the start of last year. That's ninth most in the NFL. They've allowed 15 receiving touchdowns to wide receivers during that span, right in the middle of the pack. So it's not like they've been shut down. Denzel Ward is good, but if Kenny Pickett wants to make it in this league, he just literally needs to throw it up to George Pickens and let him come down with it, because it was ugly last week. And hopefully they show up just a little bit more. So I have more trust that Pickens will get volume more than Zay Flowers, and then also his targets should actually be deeper down the field than Zay Flowers.
Yeah, I'm looking at the situation there. I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch that all season long. Young players emerging here faster than we think, including Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. So maybe a lot more rookie value than we expected at wide receiver. Now, another situation we're watching here is Gabe Davis. We're both pretty high on him. You have him as wide receiver 27. I think I'm right there with you. So I think we have to play him this week. I mean, the Raiders, this looks like a primo matchup for him to make big plays downfield. And we saw Courtland Sutton. He's a big guy, right, that has some speed, and he had some success last week against this Raiders secondary. So it all lines up really well for Gabe Davis. So we say Tee Higgins, Mike Williams, Gabe Davis, they all have similar bodies, right, and similar roles sometimes. And I think Gabe Davis, a field stretcher, this is the type of game where Josh Allen is going to go back to being Josh Allen, where it's not going to be just him running around, just scrambling, trying to make some plays here. He's going to be comfortable, throw it downfield, get those big plays, home run shots. So I think Gabe Davis scores on a long touchdown this week.
Yeah, Gabe Davis was one of my, you cannot play last week because the Jets are just shut down the deep passes, right? And that's exactly where Gabe Davis pretty much gets all of his production. But he did still run the third most routes. Gabe Davis ran the third most routes among all wide receivers in week 1 per PFF. So he was out there all the time. He's going to have the opportunity. And like you said, I think Josh Allen is going to come out and just be angry and on fire after all those turnovers he had last week. And with them losing the game, I think this is going to be a monster performance from the Bills offense, and Gabe Davis will be a part of that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because we need to get him going here. I think he has the talent to do it, and just doesn't have to see the Jets secondary this week. And Mike Evans, Chris Godwin already may be exceeding some of our expectations here with what they've done. I mean, we had low expectations with Baker Mayfield transitioning from Tom Brady, but look, they both came true, especially Mike Evans here with the big play downfield against the Vikings for a touchdown. And now you get the Bears secondary. They have one good corner, Jalen Johnson, but we know they couldn't stop Romeo Doubs last week. He was their best receiver for Green Bay. And now you have a couple guys that are going to cause them problems. They're not very good in the slot either, so that's good for Chris Godwin. So it's pretty close. I just like Mike Evans always a little bit more than Chris Godwin because his touchdown consistency, right? He has a little bit more shot at going up and getting a ball on a short pass. And it seems to be early, at least Baker Mayfield has a decent connection or maybe a better connection, where I think Brady was a little bit more with Godwin all over the field, where I think Mayfield calculated with the big plays to Evans. So it's pretty close to me. I think they're both at this stage where they're playing and this matchup, they're both solid wide receiver 3 plays with some upside.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Evans is going to be inconsistent, but it's nice to see he had 10 targets, right? And he had that deep touchdown. The thing with Tom Brady, I mean, how many times did he dump it down to running backs and to Chris Godwin super short? So that's what led to so much inconsistency with Evans. Rachaad White only had 2 targets. If Tom Brady plays that game last week, he probably has 10 targets in that game just from dump offs from Brady nonstop. So I do like both of these guys moving forward. It's still not going to be super comfortable putting him in because Baker could just fall flat on his face in any given week. But against this Bears matchup, you can play them both. And Mike Evans has a really high ceiling in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, maybe Baker's just going to be better than we think. And who knows? The Bucs.
I love Baker, but
they could start
I absolutely love
2-0.
Baker.
Yeah, they could be in the charge of this division by the end of the weekend, which is crazy. But that's definitely something we're looking at. And speaking of Tom Brady, his former team, Mac Jones, he played well there. But Kendrick Bourne ended up being his top receiver there. He looked really good there. And Kendrick Bourne was kind of a playable wide receiver 3 a lot last season. So now he's cleared the guy over Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't know why you'd be interested in Devontae Parker at all. So Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry, I think these 2 guys are where the passing game is going to go through most for Mac Jones.
Yeah, we're both saying he's a good play this week. I mean, you have him at wide receiver 26. I have him at wide receiver 29. Is this us overvaluing week one too much? Maybe, but 11 targets. And I already thought maybe he was going to be Mac Jones, number one wide receiver over Juju. And that's what we saw in week one. It's a nice
Yeah.
matchup against the Dolphins. So I'm going to ride that. And I'm willing to play him if I need to. Like, he may be ranked over some guys like Gabe Davis or close with Pickens or close with Mike Evans. I'm playing all of them over Bourne, but I think Bourne is still a very viable option this week. And we're going to talk about his tight end that he plays with here at the top of our next segment, and some other tight ends that we like this week.
Yeah, and maybe we'll give Sam LaPorta some more love this week. He had
Ooh.
a very good first game, so look forward to that. We both love Sam LaPorta, so that's always fun to talk about, and we'll get there here. But maybe some guy that you might be playing on Prize Picks this week, and it's really easy to get in on Prize Picks. You just have to get into it now because it's the most exciting time and the most exciting way to play DFS. Just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And it's a lot of fun to play. Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more play there for you. And Prize Picks now offers Apple Pay for much needed quick and easy deposits into your accounts that are going to be there for you all season long. You can also expect quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes Prize Picks the number one daily fantasy sports app. So check it out today here. It's a lot of fun to play, getting in on these projections. And all you have to do is go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, and you'll get that prize match up to $100. Go check it out there. Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. Get in the game today. All right, Michelle, we buzzed a lot about Sam LaPorta before, so I guess we'll talk about him at some point here. But let's start quickly. Hunter Henry. We both like him quite a bit here. You have him at number 4. I have him at number 4, I should say.
Yeah.
So actually now I'm all the way, I think, ahead of you now. You have him at number 7. So I was just expecting you to be higher on Hunter Henry than myself, but I'm buying into it. There's just not a lot at tight end at this stage, and we know he's the key target. And remember, this guy was a very good fantasy tight end for the Chargers. He's just picking up where he left off here in 2021. So we love Hunter Henry this week. You agree that for now in this landscape, you got to play him?
Yeah, and I just have him behind the top guys, right? It's Kelsey and
Yeah.
Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, Darren Waller, George Kittle, Dallas Goedert. I'm still gonna trust all those guys. They all have high ceilings. Dallas Goedert, I think, is gonna have a fine game on Thursday Night Football. So I'm still gonna throw them in before trusting Hunter Henry. But if I don't have any of those guys, Hunter Henry is my next guy up. Like, I don't want to start anyone else besides him. I mean, he was the tight end 1 last week, right? And he gets a fantastic matchup this Sunday. The Dolphins defense has allowed the 3rd most points to the tight end position since the start of last year. And Mike Gesicki wasn't really a threat at all to him. I didn't expect him to be, and he wasn't, right? Henry played nearly double the snaps than Mike Gesicki. He ran the 3rd most routes among all tight ends in the NFL last week. So Hunter Henry is the guy there that's going to be the receiving tight end. And if Mac Jones does throw touchdowns in this game, they're either going to go to Henry or Bourne. Like, I think those are really the 2 options. So I like Henry again this week, and I think he's easily a top 10 tight end play in this matchup.
Yeah, one guy that we defer on here, we both have him in the top 10. I am at number 5 here, and looking at Evan Ingram against the Chiefs, you have him at number 10. And I have Evan Ingram ahead of George Kittle and Darren Waller. I'm just not too enthused about Kittle getting enough targets here in this type of game. And Darren Waller, we got to watch the hamstring. They said it's going to be nagging all the time. So I'm hoping for a rebound here against the Cardinals. He was still okay and active, but I do like Evan Ingram's upside more than those guys this week. I think it could be an Ingram-type game. We've seen him explode in certain matchups here. And again, if you look at the Chiefs defense, they're very good in the slot with L'Jarius Sneed, so that's probably not great for Christian Kirk. They have two decent corners. I'm not worried about Calvin Ridley, but it could be less of a Zay Jones action here. So Evan Ingram in the middle of the field, the Chiefs just really do not cover this position well. I think it's going to open up opportunities here. So I think he'll be a lot more involved this week and be their second leading receiver behind Ridley.
Yeah, maybe. That's why I have Evan Ingram at 10, because there's just too many options. I mean, Christian Kirk was barely utilized last game. He could get more targets. Zay Jones played a ton. Travis Etienne was getting in there with targets. Like, it could be an Evan Ingram game. It could not, right? And he just doesn't score enough touchdowns for me to feel good about him. We know George Kittle at the end of last year with Brock Purdy, he was scoring touchdowns like crazy. So I just think the touchdown upside with Kittle is a bit higher. He is just as inconsistent with the targets as a guy like Evan Ingram, but that's why I trust Kittle more up there in my top 5 than I do with Evan Ingram. But it is a really, I mean, it should be a high scoring matchup. So it's not the worst play. I just don't feel great about it.
Yeah, I think it'll be solid. I mean, I think it just depends if he can score. That's going to pump him into the top 5. I think so. It really comes a lot of it with tight ends. Really, can they get in the end zone? Because that really is the cheat code to saying, okay, you're automatically getting those 6 points. That's harder to get elsewhere at tight end. And Sam LaPorta, I'm going to predict right here, Michelle, he is going to get in the end zone. You have him at 9. No, you have him at 8. I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. The average is 9 because I have him at 10 here. So this is really an endorsement for Sam LaPorta. I think you've got to play him against the Seahawks. Look, Seahawks have a bad history against a tight end. Tyler Higbee just wasn't involved for the Rams. They didn't need him. They ran, and the receivers did all that they wanted last week. But the Lions need him. They played him really often, and he looked good against the Chiefs in that same matchup that Evan Ingram gets this week. And then LaPorta, look, he's going to be a key target with Josh Reynolds behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. These are the guys that Jared Goff is going to look to most until Jameson Williams comes back. And I don't think it's going to change much with LaPorta. So I think I'm going to call it right now. The rookie gets in the end zone for the first time in this game. A high-scoring affair here, a short red zone pass. Play action. Jared Goff is going to find him in the back of the end zone.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it was just great to see in the first game of his career in such a big game on national television in the kickoff game, like a game that they're really, they wanted to make sure they didn't make any mistakes. They trusted a rookie tight end so much in that game. He ran the 3rd most routes, had the 3rd most targets on the team, behind only Amon-Ra and Josh Reynolds. And it was just really awesome to see that right away. And you would expect his usage and his targets to only increase as he gets more comfortable. And like you said, the Seahawks are just a fantastic matchup for tight ends. So I have him ranked right behind Hunter Henry this week. I think he's a really great play.
Yeah, I'm on board. I mean, there's just a lot of tight ends iffy at this point. And if he's going to get that usage and look good doing it, we have to go there. One guy we're not high on at all is Kyle Pitts. I just
Poor
can't
Kyle
say
Pitts.
his name. Yeah, you have him at 15. I have him at 16. So he's not playable.
Are we giving up on him? Are we just giving up on him?
I'm giving up on Arthur Smith using him. Let's just say that. Like, I'm really disappointed. I mean, him and Drake London, if you put them in any other offense that likes the forward pass, they're probably going to get used there. Like, I'd love to see Drake London and say Carolina, right? Play with Bryce Young and maybe give him some help. Or we know Bryce Young like Hayden Hurst, so maybe they just need to trade both these guys to a team that's going to use them. And I don't know, Kyle Pitts. I mean, Green Bay is typically good against the tight end. Cole Kmet had some decent numbers last week, not spectacular, but Green Bay, I mean, it's a tough defense. I think overall, I think it's a carbon copy pretty much. I think the Falcons are a little bit better running team, but their quarterback stinks more than Justin Fields, which is hard to say. But when you look at that, that's also the other concern right here, Michelle, is that Desmond Ridder is not very good. And I think Arthur Smith is actively trying to hide him in these games. And so I will feel good about Kyle Pitts and Drake London only when Taylor Heineke is a starting quarterback.
I don't even know if that matters, though, right? I mean, I guess Marcus Mariota wasn't throwing a ton either. So I guess if Taylor Heineke comes in, maybe he throws more. But Pitts has now had 3 or fewer receptions in 9 of 11 games played since the start of last season. 3 or fewer receptions in 9 of 11 games. And in the other 2 games, it was 5 receptions. So he hasn't had more than 5 receptions in a game since 2021. He has scored 7 or fewer PPR points in 8 of those 11 games. And it's not like the other games were, he had one big game, right? And it was 5 for 80 and a touchdown. He really just needs that touchdown. You can't trust that. I mean, how many times can you say, well, he could win me a week? It's like, once every 11 games, maybe. And it's not even like 19 points is necessarily winning you a week. It's not anything absolutely insane. So I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm done trusting him. If you drafted him, maybe you keep going. But I don't know how many times you can put him into your lineup for him to score 3, 4, 5 points over and over and over.
Yeah, it's hard to watch. You're like, is Kyle Pitts playing? Is he hurt? And you just watch the stat line and just gets stuck there. And it's so frustrating. And I'm glad I don't have any shares of him this season. I'm just going to say that. And definitely not going to touch him anywhere in DFS lineup until you can know you're going to get something from him. Now, Hayden Hurst, it's another guy we're not super high on this week, just because, again, the matchup is a lot more difficult against New Orleans. They're just very good against the tight end. They blanked Chukwueze Makankwo last week. So I just don't like this for Hayden Hurst. And one thing I hope he's not the best target overall here for Bryce Young going forward. They need to get Jonathan Mingo. Someone get going here in this offense, because I think it has potential. But yeah, the receiving core, as we saw last week, they're going to hamper this rookie number 1 overall pick quite a bit. But Hurst will get his targets. I just don't see them being valuable this week.
Yeah, I mean, he led the team in targets with 7, led the team in receiving yards with 41. He caught Bryce Young's only passing touchdown. Like that's all good. Like, I'll take that from a tight end, right? But the Saints, they've only allowed one tight end to even score 10 PPR points in a game against them since the start of last season. It was no tight end has scored more than 15 points against them in that span. The ceiling for Hurts is just so low in this matchup. And we know the floor is going to be low as well with Hayden Hurst. So they need DJ Chark back and Adam Thielen to be fully healthy. Like, this offense cannot run through Hayden Hurst, or else it's going to be a disaster, like you said. But I'm staying away from him this week. I don't picture it to be very pretty against the Saints.
Yeah, I don't like his chances at all in this game. So, yep. So there you have our look at our wide receiver and tight end rankings, Michelle. I think we did a pretty good job here. We were a little bit more on the same page this week, which is great. That means you want to play those players, folks. If we are agreeing totally on the way, then it's the best bets we can have for you for your lineup. So we will help you with look at DFS and some updates you need to know. Again, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in the league. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, good way to close the show today, and then we'll close the week looking at the plays that you can do in DFS and some other things that you need to watch out for this weekend. So for Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.